Okay, so we've been talking about populations, all right? In your guys' reading, you talked about different factors that affect a population. So we're going to look at these and how we describe population. So the first of those factors is going to be population size. So make sure you get that down. Population size, okay? And this is just the total number of individuals in a given population at any time, all right? Now, this is a good metric to tell how a species is doing. Problem is, it's not the only one, right? It's not a perfect kind of population. It's not a perfect metric because it doesn't really give you the full picture, right? It doesn't give you the full picture. You know, if you said, you know, there's 100 people live here, you know, is that good or bad? It's like, well, it depends, right? How much space is there? How many homes are there? How much food is there, right? If 100 people lived in LA, right, there'd be plenty of space. If 100 people lived in your house, right? Does that make sense? So it's not just the size of a population, right? There's going to be other factors that go into understanding how a population is doing and different ways to describe and understand populations other than just the size. Now, the other one I do want you to have on there is sampling. So make sure you write sampling, okay? So sampling is how we tend to determine population size in nature, okay? This is where essentially we take a small sample and then we extrapolate out to the big picture, okay? It would be like if I went to, you know, Texas and in 5 square miles of desert in Texas, I found 5 kangaroo rats, okay? Then if I know that there's 100 square miles of desert in Texas, if I found 5 kangaroo rats in 5 miles, what do I think the total population is? 100. Probably 100, right? Because in my sampling, I found 1 kangaroo rat per square mile, right? Now, do you think it would be worth it to spend the money and time to search 100 square miles for kangaroo rats? Do you guys think that that would be something we should spend our time and money doing? No. Right? That would be way too difficult. So what we do is we sample a small portion and then we extrapolate it out like I just did there. Okay? Same thing. Have you guys ever heard like there's only like 3,000 of this particular animal left in the world? Have you guys heard of that? Like tigers. In the wild, there's like 2,500 tigers left in the wild. Have you guys heard that before? Have you guys heard that there's actually more tigers like in the U.S. than anywhere else in the world? Because people have them in zoos and their own private zoos. There's actually more tigers in the U.S. than there are in the wild, okay, that are in zoos. It's kind of crazy. But how do we know there's 2,500 tigers? Did we actually count 2,500 tigers? No, right? What we do is we go to areas where tigers live, their habitat. We see how many there are in the habitats we study. And then we know, well, we studied 5, and we know there's 2,500. Right? And we multiply it out. Does that make sense? That's what sampling is. Just like, have you guys ever heard surveys where people say, you know, 74% of Americans think this? Have you guys ever heard that before? Did any of them ever ask you? So how do they know? Well, what they do is they get a sample of like 300 Americans who are of different ages, different sexes, different races, different socioeconomic status, and they ask them, right? And then if 300 of them, right, of the 300, 70% say this, then we're saying, well, then we can extract that 300 to the 300 million US and say, well, 70% of them. So it's cheaper and easier and quicker than trying to interview all 340 million people in the US. But what's the downfall of sampling? It's good because it's easier and cheaper and faster, but what's the downfall? Right, it's less accurate. Just like, do you guys know the probability of getting heads or tails when you flip a coin? It's 50-50. But does that mean if I flip a coin 5 times, it will be split 50-50? No, right? Can I get 5 tails in a row? Yeah, right? And so if I flip the coin 5 times, I get 5 tails in a row. It's actually 100% tails, right? But my probability to flip the 6th coin is what? It's still 50-50. Right? How is that possible? Well, you take a big enough sample. If I flip that coin 10 million times, do you think I'm going to get 10 million tails in a row? No. Probably not, right? It'll probably end up being about 5 million heads, 5 million tails, right? The bigger the sample, the more accurate it is. Does that make sense? Okay, so sampling is good, but it's not always 100% accurate. So make sure we understand that. Okay, so another way to look at populations is population density. You guys read about this yesterday. Okay, population density is the number of individuals compared to the space they occupy. Okay. So would you guys like to be in a class of 20 people? Do you think that would be pretty good? A class of 20 people? What do you think? Do you think if all your classes only had 20 people, that would be better? Okay. But what if I put you in classrooms that were the size of a closet? Would that still be better? No, right? What's the problem? What did I do there? What did I change? The space available, which means what did I do to the population density? I increased it, right? So if you look at the definition of this, okay, we look at the definition of this, we can see, right, if density equals the number of individuals divided by space, right, divided by space, that means if I increase the space, the population density goes down. If I increase the numbers, population density goes up, and vice versa. If I decrease the number of individuals, my density goes down. If I decrease the space, my density goes up. Okay? So if I take 20 people and put you in the gym, you're going to have lots of room, right? You're not going to have to fight for desks, for seating, for anything. Plenty of space. But if I take those same 20 people and put them in a closet, now you're going to be fighting for space, competition for everything that's going to be in that small amount of space. Does that make sense? Okay? So we see this with California versus Iowa. Okay? A perfect example would be that house. There was a house across the street. Okay? There was a house across the street, literally straight across Valencia right there. Okay? There was a house across the street, and it was worth $975,000. Okay? It was 3 beds, 2 baths, like 1,700 square feet, and it was almost $1 million. Okay? If you took that same house, same amount of space, right? The entire property, you picked it up, took it in a plane, and dropped it in the middle of Iowa, do you know how much that house would cost? It would cost about $99,000. You could buy that house for what it would cost for you to put a down payment on this house. Why? If it's the exact same house.
The population density
is what?
It's really low.
Where?
In Iowa.
And what is it here?
Really high.
Why?
There's a lot more people.
Well, but why?
Because it's more desirable.
Right. So more people want to be here. So more people want to be in this population, right? And the same amount of space, that means we have a higher density. That increases things like, and we're going to make sure we write this down, okay? We'll talk about these in a little bit, but I'll give you a little preview here so we can see this. You can write this down, okay? High density leads to, okay, higher competition. Right? Competition for housing, competition for mates, competition for food, competition for space, right? 100,000 years ago, what did we do for competition? How did we fight for in our competition? We literally fought and killed people. Now what do we use? Money, right? Now we use money. The reason why you can't get this house is because you don't have enough money. Whereas in the past, it would be you couldn't get the house because I fought you off and I killed you. And everyone who tried to take my house, I fought them. Right? Does that make sense? But now we use money instead of killing. Okay? Whereas in nature, if this is yours, right, and another animal wants it, what are they going to do? They're going to fight you and you got to kill them all to keep it, right? Does that make sense? So the greater the density, the more competition. And also, the greater spread of disease as well. If you guys think back to COVID, you guys were like 4th, 5th grade. Where were the highest rates of COVID in the U.S.? In cities, right? Think about it. You go to Manhattan, you go Times Square, You can walk for 1 mile and literally interact with 10,000 people, right? You go to your farm in Iowa, you walk a mile, you might interact with a cow. And that's it, right? You might walk 10 miles and not even see another human. Okay? There are parts of the country you can literally drive for 50 miles and you are the only human that exists within that 50 miles. Right? So is it going to be easy to spread a disease if you never run into someone else? No, you're just going to get sick, and if it kills you, you die, and that's it, and it ends with one. Whereas if you're in New York City and you have that disease and you walk and you interact with 10,000 people, now you just infected 10,000 people potentially, and then each of them is probably going to interact with 10,000 people, right? So you got 100 million people infected from one person in one city, and you got one person infected from one person in another place. Does that make sense? So higher density means competition, right? And spread of disease. We'll talk about this in a little bit in more detail. It's called density-dependent factors, okay? But just wanted to talk about why density is an important factor more than particularly just size, okay? And then we also have distribution, okay? So distribution, okay? Population distribution is how they're arranged within an area. We'll go over these in a second, okay? It's how they're arranged in an area, okay? Are they all clumped together? Are they spread out randomly or are they spread out evenly, right? And different populations work in different ways, okay? So if you see that, right? So how the population is spread out, we can see here, here's a good example of clumped. Clumped tends to be herd animals. Why do herd animals clump together? Protection, right? There's safety in numbers, right? Does that make sense? That's why we see, anybody here ever gone deep sea fishing? Anybody ever gone fishing in the ocean? On a boat? Right? The hard thing about fishing on a boat in the ocean is, are the fish evenly spread out? No, the fish are clumped together in schools. And you can literally go out and you can go on a boat for 30 miles, one way and another, and never see any fish. And then all of a sudden you stop here and there's 10,000 all right here in one. So you're just whoosh, woo, right? Catching as many as you can. Because they're all clumped, and they're clumped for safety, right? They're not spread out evenly. It's not like, oh, here's a fish here, 10 feet down, here's another fish here. It doesn't work that way. That would be very nice, right? But that's why fishing costs a lot of money, and it's nice when you can find those, and the people that are good can find those, because you can get lots of fish all at once, okay? So herd animals, fish tend to be clumped, okay? Then you have random, like most of these plants and flowers tend to be random. Do you guys know how flowers and plants reproduce? They tend to do it one of two ways. Yeah. Good. So they have animals that spread their seeds for them. Bees will come in and they'll get nectar. Pollen gets on their legs. They go to the next flower, drop off that pollen. Do you guys, anybody here allergic to pollen? You guys have heard of pollen? Do you guys know what pollen is? I mean, you know what it is, but do you know what it is? Pollen is plant sperm. Okay, it's the reproductive cell of plants. Okay, and it gets released one of two ways, either through animals, right, moving around and pollinating, or they release it to the wind, which is why when it's windy and dry, a lot of people that are allergic to pollen get their allergies because the trees release that pollen and the wind takes it, right, and so it spreads it out randomly. Whether it's animals or wind, that's going to be random. So there's no real pattern to where these plants pop up. Does that make sense? Okay. And another one is going to be evenly distributed, okay, or uniformly distributed. And we see these plants here. Okay. Some of these plants, what will happen is if this plant is too close to that plant, their roots will entangle and they'll both die. So what happens is these plants need to be a certain distance apart, otherwise they will kill each other. Okay. We also see this. There's a video of that Planet Earth video where they show in the desert in Dubai that there are birds that nest on the ground, but their nests are evenly distributed amongst each other because if they get too close, one bird will attack the other bird's eggs and eat the eggs and kill them, right? Away, they won't do it because if they get off of their eggs, then someone will come and kill their eggs, right? So they have to be just out of pecking distance so that they can sit on their egg and not get your egg, right? And not peck each other, right? Because if their eggs are too close or they're too close, they'll peck each other and kill each other. So literally, they did a drone flyover, and they're all exactly like the same distance apart, which is pecking distance away from each other. So they just missed by like a couple inches, and they're like, all right, no one can get my egg, I can't get their egg. That's the optimal distance. Does that make sense? Okay, so it's really kind of interesting how they can spread out. So we can look at distribution. We can look at clumping, random, uniform. These ones tend to be more difficult to find, right? Because most of the population is in one area, and then it will move as it goes through. So once you find the population, you see all of them, right? Whereas if you look at like leopards or tigers or individualistic animals, they tend to be more random, right? Where you can look all over the place, right? And you might find one here, then you have to look all over again and find another there. Whereas if it's a herd, right, you find one, you find all of them. Does that make sense? Okay, so make sure we understand that. Distribution. Another one is age structure. What I want you guys to do is draw that illustration, because that will be on your quiz on Friday. Okay, so make sure you know how to understand that graph. So you don't have to draw it in all the detail. Just get the basic shapes, okay? And the age is the youngest at the bottom, oldest at the top, and we'll talk about what that means, okay? So let me do this. I'll actually draw it for you. And like I said before, don't judge your drawings based on mine. Just do your best, okay? So if we're here, so we have age structure, kind of looks like this. Age structure's here. And then we have an age structure that kind of looks like this, right? And then we have an age structure that looks like this. Okay, so this is 1, 2, 3. This is age going up. Okay? So we're going to talk about these and make sure you know what these mean. So this one right here, number 1. Okay? Number 1. This is a growing population. How do you know it's a growing population? What are most of its population? What are most of its members? What age are they?
Young.
They're young. And what do young individuals tend to do more than old individuals? Reproduce, right? They reproduce. This is growing. But the types of nations that this occurs in, these are going to be third world / developing countries. So these tend to be countries that don't have government that runs well, right? They don't have infrastructure that runs well. They're what we call developing, right? Or third world countries, okay? Where most of the people in the country are young. Why do you think that is? What happened to the old people? They're dead for a couple reasons. One, right? They don't have sanitation, so disease spreads rapidly. So the people who are older and weaker die off easier. Also, right, there probably is malnutrition, so the older you get, the harder it is to find food, so you're probably going to die off, right? And because the government is unstable, they're probably having lots of wars. And who tends to fight in those wars, right? The people who, obviously children are in there, so it tends to be a little bit older people, okay? I think it's Nigeria, I want to say. It's one of the fastest growing countries in the world. 60% of the population of Nigeria is under 30 years old. I mean, most people are under 30, which means they're going to have the opportunity to grow. But the problem is, why aren't there older people, right? Because of corruption, because of wars, because of disease, because of famine, things like that. The problem, what do you think the problem might be trying to run a country when most people are under 30?
A lot of young people.
What's the problem with that? They don't know what they're doing. Young people are dumb, right? Not you guys. They're young people. But in general, young people don't know how to do anything. That's why you can't be president until you're what? Do you guys know? 35. Why? Well, because you don't know what you're doing. You've never done it before, right? You think you can run a country if you've never run a business, if you've never had any experience doing anything, right? Most of you guys have never had a job. You think you'd be good at being a president? No, you have no idea. Most of you have never even have friends that have died, right? By the time you get to my age, right? Family members die, friends die. I've had experience with hundreds of people that I've known are dead. You probably don't know more than 2, right, at your age. So if you're going to go out and send people off to war, you think you'll be able to do that and have the guts to do that and make that decision? Probably not, right? And understanding economics and understanding how all these things work, right? So the problem is, if you have a country where most people are under 30, most people don't know what the heck they're doing, right? The country's going to grow, but it's not going to be very stable. Does that make sense? Number two, okay? Number two, this is a stable country. So it's not necessarily growing, but it's not necessarily shrinking. This is like the US and Canada right now. Okay? These are developed countries. They have technologies so that old people will live to be old age. Okay? I don't know if you guys know this, but the average lifespan in the US 150 years ago was about 46. Now it's 86. Okay? We almost doubled our lifespan in 150 years because of the things that occur in these countries that are now stable, right? We have good sanitation, we have enough food, we deal with disease, so on and so forth. Does that make sense? Okay? That other developing countries haven't been able to do yet. Okay? So we allow our old people to live. Now, this last one. What do you notice about this? What's different about this one? Most of the population is what? Old. Most of the population is old. And this is what we would call a declining country, right? The growth trend is there declining. Okay? And this is going to be like South Korea. South Korea is a perfect example of this. Okay? Where most of the population is old. I think in South Korea, 50% of the population is over 60 years old. What do 60-year-olds not do anymore? Reproduce. They don't reproduce. So we're not having babies, right? Here's the thing. So I told you guys my grandma just passed away like last month, right? Had her funeral and all this stuff. My grandma had 35 grandkids. Okay, so my grandma and grandpa had 35 grandkids. Okay, so I'm one of, there's 34 others besides me. Does that make sense? Okay, in South Korea, do you know what that average is for someone in South Korea? In South Korea, you can take 100 people, so 50 couples. So if there's 50 couples that are in their 70s, let's say, which is grandparent age, right? Late 60s, early 70s. Do you know how many grandkids they would have all together of those 50 couples? 4. So one family, one set of grandparents has 35 here. In South Korea, 50 sets have 4 total. Not 4 each, 4 total, right? So that means their population after 2 generations will drop 96%, right? And so right now in South Korea, in the next 30 years, their population is going to get cut in half by 60%. So in these kids that are like 5 years old now, right, if the population is 100 million there, when those kids are 60, the population will be about 45 million, right? That means 55 million people, okay, are gone. Gone. Half the population gone, right? And that's a problem because then you don't have enough people to work the jobs, to run the infrastructure, to do all the things that need to be done. And that is a declining population, okay? So we have growing, we have stable, and we have declining. Make sure you can identify those structures, okay? So make sure we understand that. Oops, wrong one. Come on, you can do it. There we go, yay. Okay? So make sure we understand that. Another one is sex ratios. How many males versus females are there? Okay? This could be a problem if there's not enough females in a population, right? Like if I gave you guys this scenario, let's say there was a huge disaster and all of the human population was wiped out except for 10 people. There's only 10 people left. You guys just do the first line up there. You don't need to do the rest of it. Okay? If there's 10 people left in the world, which scenario A or B would give us the best chance to repopulate and keep the human species going? Scenario A, there are 9 males and 1 female. Or if there are 9 females and 1 male. That's scenario B. A or B? Who says A would be better? Who says B would be better? Why? Why would B be better?
A lot of people that can populate is higher
Why?
because the male can't reproduce.
Right. Males don't produce babies. Right? So if there's 9 males and 1 female, that means how many babies can you have every year? About 1. Whereas if there's 9 females and 1 male, how many babies can you have every year? 9. Does that make sense? Okay? So what we need to make sure we understand is in any given population, right, there needs to be at least equal or more females than males. Otherwise, that population doesn't have a chance to continue to grow. And the other problem is, right, what do you think happens between the males if there's not enough females for them to reproduce? What are those males going to start doing? What? They're going to start killing each other to get access to the females. Does that make sense? We see this all the time, right? In natural populations, they fight each other literally for the chance to mate with the female, right? We saw this in some of our videos. Remember the birds that are dancing and doing all that stuff, right? They're competing to get the female to reproduce with them, right? Male humans don't do that. Male humans don't ever do things, right, to get females to be attracted to them. Like they don't work to get a lot of money, buy cars, houses. They don't do all of those things and fight each other for females, right? That doesn't happen in us because we're too evolved. No, not so much, right? So all animals do this, right? All animals do this, okay? And what will happen actually in our closest ancestors, bonobos and chimpanzees, what will happen is if there's actually not enough females, what will happen is the males that do not get to reproduce will band together and they'll go and kill the other males and steal, right, and force themselves to reproduce with the females. Does that make sense? So it's not a great scenario for most monogamous or mammals, okay, to not have a 50-50 or close to 50-50 when sexual reproduction is used for the population to grow. Does that make sense? So that could be a problem too, right? We tend to see this in certain populations where there's way too many males, right, compared to females, and then all of those social issues come about that go with that, okay? Now, looking into population growth. How do populations grow? Why do they grow? Okay? We're going to draw this real quick. So I'm going to show you, we're going to do lots of drawings because these charts will be on your quiz. So let's make sure we know how to draw them, okay? So, what we have here, okay, this is age, okay, and then this is survivorship, meaning how likely are they to live, okay? And the first one we see is type 1. Type 1 looks like this. These are going to be like humans, okay? We're going to classify each of these so we know. These are going to be humans. They tend to be big. These animals tend to be big. They're larger animals, okay? They also tend to have long lifespan. And the reason why, okay, is because most offspring survive. Okay, so most offspring survive. And so they have few offspring. So we're going to fill this out for each of these 3. Okay? So because they're big, they can take care of their offspring, so most of their offspring survive, which means they don't have to have a lot of offspring in order to keep the population going, right? Like humans on average, I think we average, in the developed world, we average like 1.5 to 2, okay? In the underdeveloped world, they average about 4.5. Why do you think they average more kids in the underdeveloped world than the developed world? What? Well, what do you think happens to kids in underdeveloped countries?
They don't have a better chance of surviving.
Right. A lot of their offspring die, right, of disease. They don't have the health care. They don't have the infrastructure to allow their offspring to survive, so they have to have more, right? Whereas in developing countries, right, most kids that are born live. Does that make sense? It's like 96% of kids that are born in the U.S. live past year 1. Does that make sense? Okay, so most of them live. Whereas in other countries, right, that's not necessarily the case. And for other animals, that's not necessarily the case. Okay? So this tends to be humans and, I don't know why it keeps doing that, humans and big mammals are typically type 1. Okay? And so what this means is they have a very high likelihood of surviving until they get really old. Does that make sense? Okay. This next one is type 2. Type 2. These are going to be like birds. Okay. And medium size. Mammals. Okay. Birds and medium-sized mammals. Okay. They have an average lifespan. Okay. So somewhere in the middle. This is going to be anywhere from 2 to 12 years. So 2 to 12 years. Which is not long. This is going to be like your dogs, your cats. Okay. Typical pets is what this is going to be. Those types of animals. Okay. They, about half of their offspring survive. So half survive, okay? And so they typically have between 6 and 12 offspring. So not a lot, but also not a little. Does that make sense? Again, this is going to be like your dogs, right? Your dogs will have 3 to 4 babies, maybe 3 to 4 times, right? If you have them, they're not going to have a lot, right? Maybe 20 max, okay? Because they're still pretty large. Most of them survive, okay? Half of them, right? Like I remember we had a cat. Cat had babies, had like 12 babies. 4 of them didn't make it, right? They didn't make it to a year or 6 months typically, okay? Because of disease or something else, born with issues so that they couldn't survive, okay? So this is type 2. They're not very big, which means you have to have more of them because more of them don't survive, okay? So, and they have an equal chance of death at both ages. So there's like birds, they have a chance of getting eaten as an egg, and they have an equal chance of getting killed when they're old, okay? So their age doesn't really affect their chance of survival. And then the last one is going to be this curve that goes like this. This is going to be type 3. And type 3 is going to be the opposite of type 1. Okay? So these are going to be like bugs. Okay? And small mammals. Okay? These are going to be like rabbits. Did you guys know that rabbits can have up to 15 babies every 28 days nonstop? Okay, you know humans, we have 1 baby every 9 months, and then there's about a 2-month what's called a refractory period where you can't have another baby because your body parts gotta get put back together and take a break, right? With babies, or with rabbits I should say, rabbits can get pregnant while they're giving birth, right? So I had 2 rabbits that I had rescued when I was like 23. Rescued 2 rabbits. Doctor said they're both female. Cool. About 3 weeks later, I hear this screaming like someone's being murdered. Okay. I walk out, and that's what baby rabbits do. One of them was having babies, and I'm like, what? How's that possible? So it turns out one of them was a male, so I moved him out, right? And then, so we got the babies, right? The male had already killed like 3 of them because that's what they do. It's sad, right? And a couple of them didn't make it, so like 3 of them survived. We got those guys adopted out, okay, things like that. And then 28 days later, guess what I heard again? Screaming. And I'm like, what is going on? More babies. I'm like, how is that possible? We literally moved the male out while she's giving birth to these. Doctor goes, oh yeah, that was a male, and they can get pregnant while they're giving birth so that every single 4 weeks, they have 15 babies, right? So that means 1 female can have about 140 babies a year. Why? Why do you think rabbits do that? What happens to most of their offspring? They die, right? So when we're here, right, these guys have a short lifespan. Like rabbits, did you guys know that? Anybody here have a pet rabbit? Did you know that if you don't spay or neuter your pet rabbit, they only have a lifespan of about 3 years? They tend to get cancer. In their ovaries or their testes, they get cancer because they're so active and they're being so used that the cells just go out of control and they will die within about 3 years, 3 to 4 years max. That's why if you ever get a pet rabbit, you need to spay or neuter them, and they'll live to about 12 years. Right? It literally makes their lifespan 3 to 4 times longer. Okay? So these have a short lifespan from about a year to 10 years max. They have a very short lifespan. Actually, I should even say that. This shouldn't be a year. This should be days. Sorry. Okay? Because of bugs. Like there's some bugs. Like, have you guys heard of the periodical cicada? You probably have because everyone knows about it. No, I'm just kidding. Okay? You're not a nerd like me. The periodical cicada, what it does is it's a bug. It's about this big. And it's on the East Coast in like New Jersey. And what happens is this bug hatches, crawls out of the ground. Its eggs get laid in the ground. Crawls out of the ground, crawls up a tree, finds a mate, reproduces. The next day, it sprouts wings, flies around, and then dies. It has a lifespan of 2 days. That's it. But when it dies, okay, and it gets into the ground and gets dissolved into the ground, whatever, its eggs survive that, and its eggs go into the ground. And then guess when those eggs hatch? Every 17 years. So the periodical cicada only hatches 17 years. So those eggs stay in the ground for 17 years, and then after 17 years, right, all about 2 billion of them hatch at the same time, crawl out of the ground, crawl up the trees, right? Mate, they hibernate for 6 hours, right? They grow wings and then they fly around and then they die. So they have a 2-day lifespan once every 17 years, right? They would be an example of this. The reason why is most of those die, right? They have a very short lifespan. Most of the offspring don't survive. And the crazy part is every 17 years, trees grow like crazy. Other populations boom because it feeds all the other populations. Basically 2 billion bugs, so tons of food, right, is available, which means now those animals don't have to hunt, so they can spend more time reproducing. There's a baby boom in all of the animals, and the trees grow because all of those dead ones become fertilizer, and all those nutrients go in, so the trees grow extra fast. You can actually, if you look in the trees, you can cut them, you can see the tree rings. You can see like extra periods of growth. You can actually tell when the cicada came in those rings. You can see, oh, these rings that are thicker, you can tell exactly, you can tell how old the tree is by counting how many of the thick rings there are, because that's when the cicadas came. Okay? So these guys tend to be bugs or small animals like rabbits. Okay? Short lifespan. They don't live very long. Okay? Most offspring don't make it. So most offspring die. Okay? So most offspring die, and they have typically between like 15 to hundreds of offspring. They have a lot. This is going to be like fish, right? Some fish here, okay, where, did you guys know that a trout, like let's say a rainbow trout, will lay about 1,000 eggs? Do you know how many of those eggs will survive to become an adult?
13.
It's about 4, right? Close. It's about 4, right? So 4 out of 1,000 survive to become adults. That's why they have to have so many, right? Do you guys know what the number one thing that most fish eat is?
Eggs.
Fish eggs. And then if they hatch, what's the next thing that fish eat most? Small baby fish, right? So eggs and small fish are the number one food for bigger fish, right? So the reason why most of them don't make it is because they are the ones feeding all the other fish. They have to have hundreds or thousands, right? Does that make sense? Because most of them die. Okay, they're small, they have short lifespans, they grow really fast, most of them die. Okay, so when we talk about these different types of organisms, right, big ones with long lifespans, because most of them survive, they have very few offspring. Okay, these ones are kind of in the middle, and these ones are the opposite. They're small, they die quick, so they have to have a whole bunch, otherwise they'd go extinct, right? If humans had babies like this, if humans had like hundreds of babies, we'd have an overpopulation problem within like 6 generations, right? Because if a human lives to 100 years, 70 years, right, and they're really big, and they have 50 kids, that's going to be a problem, right? Does that make sense? So we don't have 50 kids because we don't need to have 50 kids. We have 1 or 2, and that 1 or 2 tend to make it all the way till they can have kids, right? So that's how we keep the population growing. Okay? Does that kind of make sense how that works? Population growth? I think let's go, we're almost done. Okay? try to get. Come on, you can do it. Come on. There we go. Okay, last one, and then I think this will be the last one, and then we'll finish up later, yeah. Okay, so the last one is there are 4 factors that affect population growth. Okay, there's 4 factors that affect population growth. You guys should know this because this was explicitly in your reading yesterday. Can someone tell me one factor that affects population growth?
Amount of births.
Births. So make sure you write that down. Births. And what do? Do they grow the population or shrink the population? Guys, birth. Do they grow or shrink the population? Grow. Okay. What's another thing that grows the population? I know. What's another thing that grows the population?
Lack of density, but
Immigration. Good. Right? So the 2 ways that a population can grow is you make new members or new members move in. Right? Those are the 2 ways that a population can grow. You can either bring members in or you can make new members. Right? What are the 2 ways that populations shrink? Death and emigration. Emigration is migration out. Okay? So death and emigration shrink it. Birth and immigration raise it. Okay? So how do you calculate if your population is growing or not? What do?
track the amount of immigration or emigration.
And births and deaths, right? So if births plus immigration is higher than deaths plus emigration, your population grows. If it's the same, it's not growing, and if it's less, it's shrinking. Does that make sense? Okay? So that's how you can tell if your population is growing or shrinking. Births and immigration versus deaths and emigration. Okay? So make sure you guys have that. Okay? Make sure you have that stuff done. I think we'll get to those maybe. I think we'll do this on Monday. So this stuff won't be on the quiz, but it'll be on the unit. It'll be on the unit or the unit test. Okay? So those last ones won't be on your quiz, but it'll be on your test next Wednesday. Okay? So make sure you guys got that darn.